Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. People are still slowly coming in, but I'm going to get us started a little bit with just some introductory information. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sarah Chapman, and I am the executive director of the nonprofit Media Burn Archive. We are based in Chicago, and Media Burn collects, produces, and distributes documentary video and experimental video created by artists, activists, and community groups. Our mission is to use archival media to deepen context and encourage critical thought through a social justice lens. And this event is part of an ongoing free series called Virtual Talks with Video Activists, which creates conversations surrounding independent media production. Today, we are very excited to be presenting a discussion with filmmaker Julie Gustafson, moderated by Rachel Fabian. We're going to be screening excerpts from 4 of Julie's films, beginning with The Politics of Intimacy from 1973 and going chronologically through her 2005 film Desire. Before I get to the intros, I also wanted to announce that Media Burn is very excited to be digitizing and preserving a significant volume of Julie's work, including camera originals from The Politics of Intimacy and other things, which are going to be available on mediaburn.org in just the coming weeks. So if you like what you see today, there will be a lot more for you to watch very soon. The work is being funded by the Council on Library and Information Resources. And we're actually be doing a virtual event in 2 weeks that will showcase even more of the work that's going to be part of that project. So the details on the event are going to be posted on our website by Monday, but it's 2 weeks from today on the 26th at 2 p.m. Central. So with that, I will introduce our guests. Julie Gustafson is an independent documentary filmmaker whose work explores the intersection of public policy and individual lives. A recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, many of her works have aired nationally on PBS and have been exhibited in festivals, museums, and schools in the US and abroad. Between 1975 and 1989, Gustafson was co-director of Global Village, a nonprofit media arts center based in New York City. She also directed the Global Village Annual Documentary Festival, hosted in its later years by Joseph Papp's Public Theater and the Museum of Modern Art. An educator, as well as an artist and curator, Gustafson taught for many years at the New School for Social Research in New York City. She was a member of the graduate and undergraduate faculties of the Annenberg School of Communications at the University of Pennsylvania and Temple University. Most recently, she was an adjunct professor at Emerson College in Boston. And a moderator today, Rachel Fabian, is currently a visiting assistant professor of cinema studies at Purchase College, SUNY. She is a graduate of the doctoral program in film and media studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara, where she also received her MA in 2013. She's the former managing editor of Camera Obscura, Feminism, Culture, and Media Studies, and also served as the editor of the Media Fields Journal special issue Access/Trespass. Her article, Reconsidering the Work of Claire Johnston, published in Feminist Media Histories, was awarded the 2020 Annette Kuhn Prize by the journal Screen. Her research examines independent and activist film and video collectives that proliferated internationally during the 1970s and 80s, and their intersections with feminist politics past and present. So I am going to hand it off to Rachel, but before that, I will just say that we'd appreciate if during the screening, you can keep your microphones off so that we can all hear the sound very well. But we would love for you to participate and ask your own questions. So please type those in the chat at any time. And also feel free to raise your hand and hopefully Rachel will notice and call on you if you'd like to speak your question out loud. So thank you so much for joining us and take it away, Rachel.
Hello, welcome everybody. First, I want to thank Sarah and the Media Burn Archive staff for coordinating this really exciting event. I'm very honored to be moderating today's installment of the Virtual Talks with Video Activist series, showcasing the career of Julie Gustafson. Julie's fascinating work explores the intersections of public policy and individual lives, and we will see that pronounced throughout the 4 different documentary excerpts we'll be looking at today. I'm very excited to use these clips from Julie's documentaries as a springboard for an open-ended discussion about her remarkable career. Julie, Sarah, and I really wanted to encourage a lively discussion for today's event. So instead of having an open Q&A at the conclusion of watching all of the clips, we would like to open a space for discussion following the screening of each individual documentary excerpt. So as a moderator, I will kind of help jumpstart the dialogue by kind of posing an initial question to consider. But as Sarah said, if you have a question or comment at any point, please feel free to type it in the chat or raise your hand or in the discussion portion once we wrap up each individual clip screening. So I believe that does it in terms of breaking down the format of the event. So our first clip today will be from the 1973 documentary, The Politics of Intimacy. But before we start showing clips, I'd like to just ask a general question of Julie. Julie, could you tell us a little bit about what first drew you to video?
Yes, thank you. I call it video my love. I was a theater director and studied theater in college and was loved the art form, but was frustrated by the lack of work by and about women. There were a lot of things that we worked on, like My Fair Lady and Our Hearts Were Young and Gay. And I didn't think I could write theatrical work. So I took a year off, like many people do, and worked at the Florence Heller Graduate School of Social Welfare, where I got more interested in public policy. And I had the chance at that point to look at Peter Davis's The Selling of the Pentagon. And that film, produced by CBS and narrated by Roger Mudd, was just so inspiring to me. And I realized that documentary was a form that I could blend my interest in storytelling and my interest in social justice topics. So after a little bit of floundering around, I moved to New York and looked at the New School catalog, where there were film courses and video courses being offered. And I first went to the film courses and got a little bit overwhelmed by the technical standards that you had to learn to work with film. And also the cost. It was unbelievably expensive to purchase film, process film, and so forth. So I ended up at Global Village, which also offered a video course. And it's such an important moment for me. I loved the low cost, number one, but the fact that it was easy to use and you could see immediately through the viewfinder what you got. There was no waiting for processing. You immediately had the imagery available to you. And I was there. I also, at the time, met John Riley, the director of Global Village, who I actually ended up marrying, and we became video making partners for 18 years. And he was a major influence in my life and, a real mover and shaker and the founder of Global Village. So that was a life important moment. The Politics of Intimacy was begun at Global Village in my first class. And I had been in a consciousness raising group and got the idea to do a work about women and sexuality. And a number of other women students joined me. And we set about making this work. It's, you'll see it momentarily, but it's a bit of a naive work, my first piece after all, technically at least. And however, it became one of my most well-known works. I hope it's not just for salacious reasons, but it is often commented upon in the list of feminist works at that time. So anyway, if you would like to play, start Politics of Intimacy, we can watch that.
I guess, okay, you get to like this peak of stimulation, or I do, and my body gets like really tense, sort of all over, just like, you know, like you can't move anymore. You're just like caught, sort of, and then it sort of, I can't really picture how it looks except just like undulations, sort of, and then just like complete relaxation.
Well, I don't know whether I can or not, because the sensation is very difficult to describe. It's something that's like an elephant that once you've, it's very hard to describe, but once you've seen them, you always know one.
Well, it was sort of a fluttery sort of feeling. I just felt very, almost as if my body wasn't there.
It's also true that an orgasm's like learning to swim. If you don't know how to swim, it seems impossible, but once you've learned, you never forget.
When it happens, the first time, you think your head is going crazy, you don't know what's happening to you, and you don't know how to take it. Then after that, you know what it is and all this, and it's pleasurable. But the first time, it's not that pleasurable, actually, because you're frightened. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, like, it's...
Did you know you were having an orgasm the first time?
No.
What did you think was happening?
I don't know. I just thought my body had gone absolutely crazy, you know, and you get that plunking, you know, I mean, you know, the feeling inside, and I said, God, you know, and like you want it to stop, then you want, and if he stops, you don't want him to stop.
The effect of sexual stimulation is to dilate the blood vessels. And all the large and the small blood vessels, and there are many, many of them. The pelvis is the most richly vascularized area in the body. Dilate. Blood rushes into the area, and valves are present that close off the outlets, many of the outlets, so that pressure builds up. They dilate more and more. As more blood comes in, it can't get out, and as the whole riverbed just swells right out. And the muscles that surround these blood vessels are stretched. And with the muscles contracting, the blood is pushed out of the pelvis, and the sensation of orgasm is a sensation of relief that comes when the vessels are suddenly emptied. It's as if the cork comes out of the bottle, but in waves.
Okay, so what we just saw was an excerpt actually from the introductory sequence of The Politics of Intimacy. So this is how we're kind of introduced to the documentary. And I find this work really striking, Julie, particularly your decision to hold informal interviews with these women where they feel enabled to speak very freely about their sexual experiences and their uncertainties around this, you know, phenomenon of orgasm. So to maybe jumpstart our conversation, I wanted to ask, how did you gain the trust of these women and encourage them to be so open in this piece?
Well, a lot of the women were close to me. My mother's in the tape, my sister and one of her friends, a neighbor, and just women that I connected to in the process of getting to know New York City a little bit. And the trust that I was able to gain comes directly out of video and its qualities, where you can play back what you filmed and show people what they look like. And interestingly enough, people are very nervous about what they look like when you're filming them. And video has this wonderful advantage where you can immediately show them that they look good and sound good. And another reason, other than that, I think I am a good listener, is that I promised that I wouldn't show any of the material until they had seen the material edited into a completed work with an audience of their peers, their family, their friends, so that they could feel confident about it. And this is a practice I use throughout my work. I never got releases from any of my characters or subjects until they had seen the work in the same sense. And of course, this would not have been tolerated if I worked for CBS or NBC. But to me and for me, it has been a really useful means of getting people to feel comfortable and trust and to collaborate in a way, which is so important.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that detail about waiting to get release forms. It seems really, really significant. And again, you know, we're wanting to kind of encourage discussion after we show each of these clips. So if anyone would like to kind of raise a comment or a question about politics of intimacy, you know, feel free to mention a question in the chat or just unmute yourself. Of course, I always have questions I like to pose, but this, in the spirit of creating a dialogue, the floor is open.
Well, one question that you had asked me earlier was why I chose to use Dr. Sherfy, Mary Jane Sherfy, who's the talking head expert in the clip that you saw. And to me, it was an obvious choice because all of the women, including myself, were searching for answers about our sexuality. And Dr. Sherfy was very avant-garde in her own field, talking about women's sexuality. She wrote a book called The Nature and Evolution of Female Sexuality. And at the time, in 1971, there was very little information that was of this detail. And so I read her book and tried to meet her, got to meet her, and she agreed to be in the film. And she's very important, although she is not as involved as the film goes along. She's really more there at the beginning of the film.
Yes, and I love how you don't necessarily set that off right away that she is the expert. We learn a little bit later on, but in that opening sequence, you know, Dr. Sherfy's the one kind of with the cat eye glasses, the older woman. Her comments kind of intermixed with those of the other women that you're showcasing, you know, lead us to think that this is, you know, perhaps another just, you know, non-expert person that you're including in the mix. And then we learn later that, oh, in fact, this is an individual who is inspired by the work of Masters and Johnson and is part of this really exciting wave of you know, research into human sexuality. So yeah, her presence is really fascinating. And it's really exciting that she was involved in the project to the extent that she was. I see a hand from Pamela.
Yes, hi. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
I'm an old friend of Julie's. I'm curious, were women curious to know how their orgasms might compare with each other's orgasms? Did that conversation ever go there, or I was just curious?
Yeah, well, perhaps you can't tell, but actually each of these interviews was filmed separately, or sometimes there were two women in the room at the same time, so they weren't actually hearing each other in real time. But a number of the women were not sure if they had ever orgasmed or if they ever would. And some were more confident, as you could tell from the opening clip. And I just think, you know, there was no Cosmo at the time. Nowadays, my daughter and younger women don't have need of such a piece. But at the time, it was really, we were really lacking information and empathy about women and their sexuality. It was just not considered. And so that was sort of the reason for undertaking the project.
Thanks.
There's also a question that's come into the chat. Hyunju has asked, how would you envision, Julie, perhaps updating this work today, given that we live in a world of cosmos and, you know, seemingly very sex positive kind of pop culture discourse?
Oh, Oh, I don't know if I would update it. I really like it as it is. Although my last work, in which you're going to see a clip of, called Desire, is also about sexuality, young women's sexuality and their impact of education and opportunity on their choices. So in a way, I did update it, and you'll see that it's different in style, and it involves a more direct collaboration with the young women in the film. So I can't imagine updating it. I guess I just like it as it is.
Yes, I definitely see Desires as a kind of interesting companion piece to this one. So I'm excited to show that clip toward the end of today's event. There's been a comment posted in the chat, not so much a question, from someone with a buffalostate.edu username. So it's just someone commenting that it's so amazing to see the close-ups of the women. It really made it feel that much more intimate. So yeah, I think that title of the piece, The Politics of Intimacy, does interestingly translate, as this comment is pointing out, into an actual feeling of intimacy as we get these close-ups.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because at the time, people with more experience than me would say that the film was technically weak and all jump cuts, and it wasn't really accepted by the powers that be at the time. But it is a naive piece technically, but it does eventually end up working, I think. And you do have the feeling that all the women are talking to each other. And I don't know, I was following the way most students at Global Village work. You started a project usually with interviews. It was the easiest thing. And there are a number of works that came out of the early Global Village student collection that are like that. And so it was an exploration, a beginning of what I learned to do. Later on, I became much more interested in and fluid, I think, in the verite style, the observational style of video making.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable that this is technically, a student work, and I'm really happy that it's being shared in this way, and that it's going to be protected and archived through Media Burn for future audiences as well. So in the interest of time, just want to place a pause on the discussion here so that we can move on to the next clip. And I'm sure, as we move our way through these clips, there are a lot of through lines in the works that Julie has produced over the years. So the kind of comments and questions raised for the politics of intimacy, I think we'll see kind of echoed as we make our way through the other documentaries. So we are now going to see an excerpt from Julie's 1976 documentary, Giving Birth, which she co-directed with John Riley. This piece offers an in-depth examination of US birthing practices, and it does so by following the experiences of 4 different couples. The scene we're about to watch features a home birth using the methods of Frederick LeBoyer, and it features a low light, mostly silent setting in keeping with the kind of principles of a LeBoyer birth that are explored in the piece. So as a note, this scene features a kind of explicit imagery of a natural birth, but without further ado, we can show the clip from 1976, Giving Birth.
Hi, babe. Hello. I didn't have any particularly terrible experiences in the hospital that make me, give me a total aversion to them or anything. I think they have their place, but I think that a home delivery also has a place. I think that's just something we've forgotten. All the technology, all the great new innovations in obstetrical care, all concerned with the problems that might arise. And what happens with the perfectly normal birth? You know, it's just, they're forgotten. Oh.
Okay.
But then again, I want to point out one confusion which is made so often. Birth is not a surgical process. And unfortunately, very often, I would say mostly in America, they are looking at birth as a surgical operation. Draping, wearing masks, all the paraphernalia of surgery.
Good, good. Good.
Almost feel like pushing.
Okay, I think you're just about ready to do it. Okay. That's okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Oh!
Okay, okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
That's
wonderful.
fantastic.
That's wonderful.
Great.
Great.
That's wonderful.
All right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. The
Oh,
baby.
the head.
Oh, the baby. Okay.
You got it. The head.
It's fine.
Oh.
Baby, you get a suction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Eleanor, good.
Okay.
Good, Eleanor.
There we go.
Oh.
Yes, yes, there's a wonderful baby, and it's a boy. And here we go. Here we go. Yes, that's a wonderful baby for you.
A newborn baby is a person. It's a guest entering your house in a way. So it should be treated like a guest. The eyes of this newborn, how lively, how intent they are. You cannot miss this expression of fantastic surprise. Obviously, this little baby is saying, where am I? What's happening to me? What's all this? Of course, he doesn't see. He is not making pictures with what the eyes are catching, but there is this feeling and this expression in this little face that really the baby is going through the whole experience of being born, entering this new environment. So dim lights, for instance, silence, and handling and touching this baby very slowly, very gently. Because understanding that to be touched for the first time, to be handled for the first time is so strange and so new that it cannot but create fear. And actually what is making birth traumatic is not so much physical suffering, it's fear, nothing but fear.
So this portrait is the second one that is featured in the film. And the first portrait of one of the couples that Julie follows takes place in a hospital following what today would look like a fairly standard hospital birth. So the contrast is quite striking when we move to this home birth scene and we hear from Frederick Laboyer and kind of see this low light and very quiet setting. So my question for Julie is, what motivated you to examine these different approaches to childbirth? And in your interviews with the couples, treating childbirth not just as a woman's ordeal, but something that has a lot of factors and stakeholders involved that rarely get discussed.
Yeah. Well, by the time of 1975, John Riley, who was the director of Global Village, and I had married, and we had our own first son. And later, John, by the way, is a co-maker of this film. And after our own birth, which was highly medicalized and off-putting, they wouldn't let John in the delivery room. They wouldn't let him be with me after the birth. And we were upset and angry. And John suggested that we try to explore this situation. And we discovered that there's a whole movement of natural childbirth and home births. And we decided to make a film like this. We knew we wanted to go into the lives of people and do portraits of, I spent a lot of time with the couples who were having babies, but we also included experts in this, along with Frederick Laboyer. There's Margaret Mead, who talks a lot about the medicalization of the American way of birth. And also Elizabeth Bing, who is the founder of the natural childbirth movement in the United States. And they were interwoven through the 4 portraits. As you can see from an artistic point of view, we're using interviews, but there is a large focus on being there with the couples. And the first birth, which is quite, in the hospital, has quite a bit of intervention, an epidural, which is an anesthetic that makes it difficult to push, and thus the use of forceps. And the third portrait was of an emergency cesarean. The fourth one was of a hospital birth with a midwife. And we thought that comparing the experiences and yet lightly weaving through these expert voices would, help people be aware that they had choices beyond what seemed like just a hospital birth. And we felt after our own experience that it would make a difference in people's lives.
Yes, it's pretty remarkable to see all of these different approaches to birthing kind of being explored in this way in 1976. And a question has come in through the chat from Ariel Doherty, noting that in terms of the scope and the aesthetic of the piece, it definitely has a different look from the politics of intimacy, particularly the use of color cameras. So if you could talk a little bit about, the kind of production shift once you begin directing with John Riley, I know that this piece was shown in collaboration with WNET and public television.
Well, I don't remember the exact year, but the original Portapak footage was black and white, but sometime in the early 70s, Sony introduced a color camera, and we started using that color camera. It's always a bit of a moment of fear when people look at it because the corners are green and the colors aren't perfect. But the advent of color video was very significant, and it got considerably better as the years went by. We were lucky to be invited by the television laboratory, by David Loxton at the television laboratory, to try to fine-tune this work technically and be able to make it high enough quality to get it on broadcast TV. David Loxton had started showing independent work, Namjoon Paik, Bill Viola, and some documentary makers, John Alpert and Keiko Tsuno, Susan and Alan Raymond. And they were working with an engineer named John Godfrey, who was a pioneer in the creation of the time-based corrector, which was really important because prior to this time, video and audio and the digital signals that emphasize the frames were running apart from each other and could not be broadcast. But Godfrey arranged a way to make sprocket holes, as it were, for video, and really pioneered and opened up a door for video makers to get their work broadcast. And John and I realized with this opportunity, because it was broadcast nationally, that we had the chance to bypass the traditional gatekeepers and make work of alternative content and alternative style that could be seen by millions of people. And that was something that sort of motivated our work as we went on. We were looking for large audiences, and it was through the TV Lab and WNET, and I would have to say, especially John Godfrey, that we were able to start showing video on the air.
Excellent. Yeah, if there are other questions, feel free to mention in the chat or raise your hand or unmute your microphone.
I'd say that, I don't know if anybody hear me because I'm on a cell phone, but I would say I totally am there with you, Julie, about John Godfrey and about how the lab made a huge difference in the way people like us were able to get our stuff out. And it was mind-blowing and terribly important at the time.
And just a piece of trivia, MediaBurn actually has John Godfrey's 1-inch machine.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
That's great.
Spectacular. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of frank nature of being in the room during this style of birth and knowing that it's being seen by national audiences. It's pretty amazing to consider for this period, and the kind of desire to capture broad audiences, but still kind of present material that otherwise had been excluded from, news reportage or, conventional television programming. You really get a sense with Giving Birth that you're pushing on that boundary. Dorothea Bramer has, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name, has offered a comment or a question. What was the audience response, if you recall, Julie? Can you describe any particular responses that stood out to you when this was first broadcast?
Well, we received a lot of positive feedback, and there were reviews, national reviews, because it was a national broadcast, where people would say headlines were a beautiful moment of birth or an extraordinary experience that you won't see anywhere else. So people came to accept perhaps the very graphic nature of the film, because it was interspersed with a lot of story about the people themselves and why they were making choices that they made about their birth experiences. In the case of Eleanor and Mark, the couple that are in this short clip that we showed you, their doctor was part of a home birth movement. And we actually found them by putting an ad in the Village Voice saying, "Do you want to make your baby a star?" And found them. They were in upstate New York, I believe, and they contacted us, and they were interested in themselves sharing this information and adjusting some myths about birth and how it had to be handled. So they were as involved as we were in the concern about the medicalization of birth in America.
All right, well, we can move on, I suppose, now to our third clip from Casting the First Stone, which was released in 1991. This documentary examines both sides of the abortion debate by focusing on the encounters of different activist constituencies at the Women's Suburban Clinic in Paoli, PA. In this clip, we see the director of the clinic, Shelley Miller, encountering a group of pro-life activists affiliated with Operation Rescue, protesting outside of the clinic. Then we follow one of the pro-life protesters, Joan Scalia, into her home where she explains her choice to defy her husband to participate in the Operation Rescue actions. So we could present Casting the First Stone.
Joan, I don't know if you want to get into this now, but I wanted to kind of relay to you my feelings about something you said last week.
Yes.
When you called and suggested, or asked, you told me you were praying for my conversion
Right, yes.
to Christ.
Right.
I was real offended by it. I thought it showed a real lack of respect for me and my kind of personal choice of the religion I've chosen for myself.
I still will pray for you, even though it offends you. But if you had Jesus as your Savior and God, you would not be the administrator of an abortion clinic.
My impression of Jesus, from what I have heard and read, is he was incredibly loving and caring person.
That's right, exactly.
And didn't judge people.
That's right, exactly. You're right, you're correct.
Is it caring and respectful to come to a woman at this clinic saying, don't go in there and kill your baby? They shred babies' parts and you will never have babies again. Is that a caring thing to say?
Do you believe this child at 10 weeks is a living human being, breathing?
At 10 weeks in utero, a fetus can't live and breathe.
This is 8 weeks.
I guess I'm more worried not so much about the soul, but rather the pain. Does it feel anything?
Well, you know, that's a good question, and it's one that we
tell.
certainly look into, because I would have a hard time working here if I thought that that were true. In terms of pain development, it appears that that happens much later. Now, the protesters say something different, and I have to look at what the information is that's coming along to us. And the people I trust now medically are saying that they don't think that there's any pain involved in fetus in a first or probably even in a second trimester abortion.
Tell you, the abortionists acknowledge that life begins at conception. They just put a value on it, so whether it's a person or not.
When does personhood?
At conception.
At conception.
That is a unique person that has begun at conception.
And it has soul, and it has all the inalienable rights that I have.
Exactly.
So you would like to weigh the life of a 16-year-old teenager against the life of a 2-week fetus.
A person's value does not hinge on the value that another person places on him. It's an absolute. How can you say, like, if I decide that you're not valuable to me, you're expendable? That's not the ethic upon which we live. You are valuable to me. You are valuable because you are created in the image and likeness of God, and you are on your own merits valuable, and that's how we feel about these children.
There's all the people out there that are protesting abortion. I mean, what answers are they offering? Are they offering any, or they're just saying, just don't do it?
In fairness to them, I think that some of them were willing to take young women until the baby's born. Some of them will help with that process of placing a baby for adoption. But as far as long-term help is concerned, I don't think that there is any, really. There's welfare. You know, we might be able to get you some financial help for short-term, but it would be that. It would be short-term.
You're right, we don't live in a perfect world. So people get pregnant when they don't want to. People live in all sorts of situations in which they're forced into sex when they don't want to have sex. We have teenagers living in a society where they don't use birth control and they're sexually active. We live in a society in which women don't have food to put on the table for their children, or living on the streets now with their kids. Let's take care of those social evils, and then maybe we won't need abortion the way we need it today.
What you're saying is poverty, kill the babies. 10 weeks, they don't mean anything.
And I would say it's not just an issue of poverty. I want the right for a woman of any means to make the decision
that she can. But she could close her legs anytime.
Shelley?
She can decide not
Shelley,
to
are
have
you
sex.
not?
Yeah, see, women can very easily not have sex.
Shelley,
you're absolutely right.
Until she's ready to commit herself to marriage.
Saying this.
The relationship. Need, huh?
Yeah,
I'm dying here.
He's dying. Those are his famous last words. When he gets hungry, he's always dying, you know. You remember when I said like how good and evil and the human and the spiritual phases are, don't they look good?
Yeah.
Pretty good. I think that we're coming from such different directions that we're really not even communicating with one another. I can see where they're coming from, but do they see where I'm coming from? Can they understand?
I don't believe in this, how do you say, what the word I'm looking for?
Feminism?
Feminist movement. To me, I'm from the old school. I'm from an ethnic background. A man should be a man, a woman should be a woman, period, amen. Okay, that's too much.
You think Joan goes too far in her work?
I don't believe in getting arrested.
I couldn't get arrested on July the 5th at the Paoli Clinic because I was obeying my husband's wishes. But then I.
Well, tell them the other story. Don't
4
tell them
days
that story.
later,
That story is-
4 days later, I disobeyed Ben and got arrested in Cherry Hill.
You hurt your movement when you do that.
After 16 years of writing to congressmen, you know what I've done through those, and nothing happening. When Operation Rescue came into being, that's when things started to happen.
Right. So this documentary is very powerful, and I was curious as to what the reviews were like when this was first released. So I was looking at some responses from critics and reviewers, and several had questioned, Julie, why you didn't take a firmer stance in your portrayal of these debates on one side or the other. So my question is, what was the value for you in presenting each side of the abortion debate using this kind of balanced perspective where you follow each set of women?
Yeah, well, first of all, there had been a number of works that had very strongly portrayed a pro-abortion point of view. Perhaps there had not been so many that showed an anti-abortion point of view. And I was more interested in the why of why people held the views that they held on abortion, why it was so polarized, and what was driving that polarization. And I just am curious about the complexity of human relationships, and also had started to use a more literary style of production, like unified character action in place, instead of the portraits all in a row with interviews tying them together. I had started trying to find characters that were unified in their lives and had connections. And so this was filmed, as you said, around the Paoli, Pennsylvania abortion clinic. And I just found, if you honestly and openly listen to people, for me, it's very compelling. And after I finished the film, I really came to realize that the controversy, and indeed the film itself, was about the definition of what it means to be a woman. Does it mean that you are entirely devoted to marriage and family and children? Or does it mean that you have more aspirations, a more complex view of your destiny and your hopes and dreams? And that this is what the controversy could be boiled down to. So I was a little taken aback by a lot of the reviews that sort of said it's overly balanced. It set me off, but it's interesting because as a result of making this work, the Ford Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation later invested quite a lot of money and resources in my next project, Desire, because they thought it was balanced. And so it had a kind of differing impact on different people.
And just wanting to point out too that in the excerpt that we saw, we do get to hear your voice a little bit asking or prompting Ben Scalia, where he's trying to formulate what exactly he doesn't agree with, and that you do get a sense of you're not only kind of directing, but you're operating the camera in the space and working in a very close way with these individuals that perhaps people wouldn't expect expect you to in the context of this piece. So so yeah, I also really am struck by that as well. And I think it also, you know, shows up in several of your other works, kind of the sense that your presence is there, either through your voice or just the way that you're, you know, holding the camera in the space.
I think another thing that can be said about this work is that in looking at it in the context of other people's video and film work, by this time, this was, I think, finished in 1989. Oh, no, 1991, I'm sorry. And by this time, the New York State Council on the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and a number of other foundations had started really supporting independent video and film work. And this was the largest budget that I had ever worked with, is $100,000. And it allowed me to travel away from my home to work with professional sound people instead of holding the mic myself while trying to shoot. There was really this instrumentality that paralleled the work of independent makers, where other organizations became involved and really supported the development of a robust independent media movement, which I think is carried out today, especially in and among documentaries, which it's the golden age of documentaries. They've become so powerful and present as a genre in American media.
And, you know, the terms of the debate still seem so unchanged in a way, in terms of, you know, hearing in 1991 and the unique backdrop, which is all of these efforts to kind of reverse Roe v. Wade and the various Supreme Court hearings happening in the late 80s and early 90s. And just, you know, for a contemporary audience, not enough has seemed to have changed in terms of how people conceptualize, you know, access to abortion, rights to abortion. So, you know, very powerful work.
Yeah.
Are there other questions or comments related to casting the first stone? Yeah, Ariel.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
One of the, I want to bring up a piece of data that is contemporary, but I think we could sort of extrapolate back to the past and it wasn't any better. But in mainstream theatrical screenings, women's directed films are shown 2.75% of the time, which means that the women's picture, even though Julie's had a lot of success on things like PBS, in general, women's stories are not reaching mainstream America. And so I'm just trying to help us think that that's another reason I think why the Roe v. Wade issue is so, you know, being chipped away at so strongly, is because we don't see women's stories in general in the general public, even really to some extent on television.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and something that's so fascinating about this doc as a whole is that you get the sense of the media savviness of organizations like Operation Rescue. You know, they are not novices. So this idea of who is getting their stories portrayed, I think is especially powerful, knowing that both sides of the issue are very equipped to use you know, forms of documentary storytelling to kind of advance certain policy ends. Well, this issue, you know, that Ariel has raised certainly is one that factors into Julie's 2005 documentary Desire, which is a very moving documentary. And it's the result actually of Julie's almost 10-year-long collaboration in the context of the Teenage Girls Documentary Project, which was based in New Orleans, Louisiana. In her role with this Teenage Girls Documentary Project, Julie worked with a group of young women from widely different backgrounds who were given an opportunity to make autobiographical videos on various aspects of their lives. So they were given control of cameras, many of them for the first time. Desire underscores the collaborative nature of this project, and the documentary weaves together the young women's videos with footage of Julie navigating her mentorship role. The following clips are excerpted videos by two of the project participants, Cassandra and Peggy, who are also featured in the documentary. Cassandra is an African-American honor student from the Desire Public Housing Development, and when she is first introduced in the documentary, we learn she has ambitions to serve in the military, attend college, and become an engineer. Peggy is a first-generation Asian American student attending one of New Orleans' top private high schools, who has college and career aspirations of her own. These two clips show each young woman's unique expression of their experiences and sense of choice with regard to their present and their futures. Both clips also demonstrate how questions of identity for each young woman are bound with their evolving views of gender roles and sexuality. So here is Desire.
Okay, Cassandra, on these particular types of drawings, you know, before we did multi-view drawings, okay?
I have a B in English, a A in algebra, and in drafting, a B.
My friends, I don't have a lot of friends.
What do? Stay inside? I don't think I have a life. You know how it is. Boredom never leaves you when you want her to. She hangs out on neighborhood corners, trying to stir something up. I checked the caller ID. No one called from me. Boredom got a call from Delvin. My mother works the night shift. My brother runs with his friends. I am left here alone with boredom. Boredom is hungry, so I cook, and we sing together. Delvin calls. He and Boredom like each other. I fuss with my brother to get his homework done. Later, we walk on the darkest corner on the planet for my mother to get off the 11:15 bus. I sleep, a dreamless sleep, waking near dawn. I'm not tired anymore, and boredom is still with me. But boredom knows that she can't stay long because I'm expecting company. It was like a big mistake. It was the first time, that was my first time, now I was pregnant. It was horrible.
Did y'all take precautions?
Yeah, half of the time. You know, but it wasn't enough.
I think I did. I made the choice to have sex. I just made a bad choice. I guess I just thought it was going to bring us closer together. But it didn't work out that way.
She probably did want a man's love because she never had that with her father. I was the father and the mother. When she was small, her dad denied her. He didn't believe that Cassandra was his, and he still don't believe it. I had so many dreams for her. I thought that she was gonna go into the service, see the world. Sure. It was like a cloudy 2 weeks when Cassandra told me she was pregnant. Looked like it always rained. Even when the sun was shining, I thought it was raining. Yeah.
What does your mother think you should do now?
She just want me to finish school and finish my plans. I still have the same desires and wants. Nothing's gonna change. Except I'm gonna have a baby.
I first met Peggy at Newman, one of New Orleans' most prestigious private schools. I was looking for teenagers with another set of desires.
I wanted to hear about the Sex Crush project.
I'm doing a piece on sex. It's gonna be me like writing on a chalkboard, I will not talk about sex until like the entire board is covered.
You seem to be the only girl in the project.
It's not had sex.
That's not what I was going to say.
If I ever got pregnant, it would just ruin my life. It would just completely ruin my life. I mean, I'd have an abortion like that. I mean, I want to go to college. I do want to get married. Like, I feel busy already, you know? I mean, because I'm a lazy person to begin with, and then I have stuff to do. So it's like I'm lazy and I have stuff to do. And then a baby on top of that would be like torture. I mean, knowing me, like if I would choose to have sex, I'd probably use like a condom and a diaphragm and a sponge and like 3 different brands of spermicide. It's horrible to say that someone who like stays a virgin is a freak, but I mean, I feel that way about myself sometimes, you know?
I gave you my body and then you gave me the boot.
When have you told your daughter about getting pregnant, or having sex? You told her anything?
No. I think she's too young for that. It's a sex before marriage. It's not allowed. In our time, it's not allowed, and it's immoral. You have to get married and then you can have a sex. Chinese are very conservative. Don't really talk much about sex.
I talk to my friends about sex all the time, And I think about it, it's completely natural. I don't think of like holding back anything at all. Do you think that the kids at Newman, do you think that they have sex? Do you think that there's less sex here than any other high school? Do you think that at Newman, like the reason why a lot of girls try to keep their sex lives secret is because they're scared of being called a slut? I mean, why? Why do you think Do girls think about sex as much as guys do?
Yeah, probably more just because girls are confused about sex. Boys know they want to have it, so they're thinking about having it, but girls are thinking about having it.
Do you think that they actually have sexual desires?
Ever since I was like young, yeah, I've always had sexual desires.
So do girls want experience?
Do girls want a boy that's experienced, or do they want to have experience?
Do they want to have experience?
I do. I mean,
I agree.
Like once I have sex with one person, I'm gonna want to do it a lot with them, just because I want to become familiar with them and like be able to like experiment with them, so that if I get in another relationship, I'll know what I'm doing.
I was 15, and I found a guy that I was very attracted to, and I was also at the peak of curiosity. There's like no reason not to have sex.
Curious Peggy takes me on a field trip. We're looking for a product called Advantage 24.
I read about it in 17 magazine in a column called Sex in Your Body. Julie, what do you think of the selection?
I don't think there was this much stuff out in the open when I was growing up. I see it.
Oh.
What do you think?
Well, it sticks to your cervix. That's the critical site. I'd buy this just because I like the name.
Astroglide?
Astroglide. Actually, this is just a lubricant. what's this? Some sort of film? And basically it says, inserted into the vagina before intercourse, VCF maintains its spermicidal action for 1 hour. Not as good as this. Wait, there's a guy coming.
All right. So Julie, this is an incredibly expansive work and one of the longer lasting or the longest lasting collaborative documentary that you've undertaken in your career. My question is, how did you sustain this project through, with the young women themselves, their families, but also through building relationships with activists and others based in New Orleans?
Well, originally I was going to make this project in New Rochelle, New York, because it was quite a diverse population, and I was interested in showing the impact of education and opportunity on young people with very diverse backgrounds. I called an anthropologist, though, to do some background research, and she mentioned that she had done a paper at a housing project named Desire in New Orleans. And like many other people, I just thought, I have to go there. I have to see this place. And it was incredibly interesting and had these romantic names, street names like industry, art, music. And they were very ironic. And when I started to do research to see if I could get any cooperation with parents and community activists to make a work with their young people about sexuality, it took me a really long time, almost a year of going back and forth. And finally, I found a group of housing activists who would talk to me. And they indicated their interest, but they weren't interested unless I was willing to give back to the community. Apparently, there had been so many white sociologists and journalists coming in, dropping into the community and taking the material they needed and writing their papers and advancing their careers, that these housing activists were willing to work with me if I would give something back. And at the time I said I didn't have very much money to work with. I said, I don't know what I can give back. And they said, well, you're an idiot. You're a teacher. You can teach them how to make video, and you can use them in your office with tasks that they're capable of doing. You can hire them. And so I agreed to do that. I actually signed a written contract to that effect. And that began the collaboration. In the beginning, I had no intention of giving the girls cameras. But in the course of teaching them video, we had a 6-week workshop, and they produced work that was so much better than anything we could do in terms of reaching out the intensity and the authenticity of their lives, that we decided that we would collaborate with them. Now, we were not the first filmmakers and video makers to collaborate with teens. There was a strong movement to that effect all going on. But perhaps what was different about this was that with the support of the Ford Foundation, I was able to give the girls cameras, and I was also able to hire young filmmakers from New Orleans through NOVAC, the Media Arts Center there. And I could give them mentors to go along with them. And I didn't want cameras on the ceiling and poor sound. And so they had the choice of actually shooting themselves or having the mentor shoot for them, but they all wrote and directed their works. And the work is really pretty amazing over time. And over it was about 5 or 6 years that I covered in the documentary, even though it took me a good bit longer to make the film and complete it.
So, I mean, so much effort and kind of commitment went into making this work. And then it also seems, extra important that the young women themselves were able to kind of see the final product. I know that you took it to some screenings where actually some of the young women were present to kind of field questions from audiences. But then, some of the distribution also had to kind of deal with the impacts of Hurricane Katrina and the exhibition. So I'm also curious, how that experience of showing the film in some settings with the young women themselves and other settings not, what that was like, and also how perhaps Katrina's impact shaped some of the distribution and reception of the film too.
Oh, it was always interesting to have the girls present, and audiences were truly interested in them. I had a strong reception to this work from film festivals and other screening venues. But it was finished just a month or two before Hurricane Katrina. And so I spent the next year or two just trying to recover along with my film community and the city of New Orleans. And so I wasn't able to put very much effort into distributing the work. So it's a lesser seen work of mine. In addition to that, because I wanted to be as honest as the young women were with me, I had included a scene where I talked about my own 2 abortions when I was a young teenager. And the young women felt that this was really important to be included in the film, and I did, but it was very alienating to the funders. And they didn't want their spokesperson or their director to be that revealing. And so that caused another controversy and a bit of blowback in making the film. I still, I don't regret putting that in, but I feel that the funders were so generous, Ford and MacArthur, in funding this long project that perhaps I should have left it out of the initial broadcast and done a director's version later. Of course, hindsight is 2020, but that was another factor in lesser distribution. So Hurricane Katrina, and my decision for the first time actually to come out from behind the camera and to share something that personal with my audiences.
Yeah, it really is, remarkable to see the trajectory of your work, and to, at various points, in casting the first stone, or even in Politics of the Intimacy, to hear your voice, to get the sense that you're behind the camera. And then with Desire, kind of securing that relationship with the young women by kind of appearing on screen with them it's quite powerful. And I think, it is a major moment in the documentary, watching it now. And it does feel to me like a continuation of a lot of the commitments you made initially, to kind of exploring, what does it mean to be, what are the central conflicts around the definition of womanhood, explored in the Politics of Intimacy, and then to see it kind of continue to inform this other work decades later, I think is very powerful, and truly kind of a testament to how you've honed those commitments and techniques and collaborations throughout the scope of your career. So there's a question from Ariel in the chat asking how long is the full runtime for Desire? I think is it an hour?
It's 86 minutes.
So yeah, a little over like an hour and 26. And then are the girls' own works available separate from the kind of compendium of Desire, the documentary?
I haven't done that, but that would be something I'd be very interested in doing, because their work is very powerful.
Yeah. Any questions? I'm keeping an eye on the time, and so I know we're about 5:15. So there's any kind of 1 to 2 questions, I think, but also want to be respectful of everyone's time here.
Well, I would for sure like to say thank you to Sarah and Levy and Media Burn for making this conversation possible. And I'm so impressed with the work you're doing. And I thank Ariel and others who are friends of mine and co-conspirators in the video movement for being here, as well as other friends and viewers.
Yeah. Thank you again, everyone. Yes, for coming, and again, it was an honor just to to respond to Julie's work and to be involved as well. And I guess I'll just hand it over to Sarah to wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel and Julie, for joining us. This has been a real honor and pleasure to watch this work, and we're really excited to continue working with Julie to preserve and digitize more work so that you all can see it, because I'm sure that after seeing these excerpts, you're interested in seeing more, as I definitely am. So keep an eye on mediaburn.org in the coming weeks, probably, and there will be more things for you to see. I also want to thank Levi for the flawless technical execution as usual, and Max, who is not on the call but is in this room, for helping with some of the organizing and coordinating. And yes, please join us in 1 week. We're going to have a showcase of our summer student documentary work, and then 2 weeks from now we're going to have a guerrilla television showcase. So keep an eye on mediaburn.org for both of those event announcements, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. So bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Julie, thank you, Julie. It was excellent.
Thank you.